and sadly, the final lecture by George Michell on the treasures of the Deccan. And once again, some background. My name is Katrina Hazel, and as an independent curator, I produce events like this. First, let me emphasize to you that this series could never have happened without the generous sponsorship of the Bagri Foundation. Lord Bagri, up at the back, Alka Bagri, nearer the front, have both come to all 4 lectures, and indeed Alka's husband and Lady Bagri have come to at least 2. So it's, I think, a tribute, of course, to George's terrific skills as a speaker. And indeed, a special thanks to Alka again and to George Michell. It was a wonderful moment when they both agreed to my suggestion that George give these talks. And as this is the last lecture, I want to thank those behind the scenes, the volunteers, the filmmakers, the audiovisual technicians, Vipul Sangoy for the design of the flyer, Surendra Kumar, who's here and over from Hampi, who took these wonderful photographs that you see on the flyer, and many of the architectural photographs you've seen that George has shown us. And, of course, Freddie Matthews of the Bagri Foundation for holding everything together. Now, as I've said before, George is very well known for his scholarly work and fabulous books on Indian architecture, sculpture, art, design, and much, much more, particularly about the Deccan. We know that George trained as an architect, but that doesn't really explain his incredibly special eye for rich juxtapositions of colours and stunning designs. In the previous 3 lectures, George has shown us the great treasures of the cosmopolitan Deccan, mainly through architecture and sculpture, both Hindu and Muslim. On the way, we have been tempted by the occasional glimpse of fabulous painted walls, dramatic contrasts of white mother-of-pearl inlay and black marble, and gorgeous motifs, both local and from Persia, Central Asia, and China. Tonight, the focus will be on these, the courtly arts of the Deccan. So please welcome George Michell.
Katrina, thank you, and thanks to all the team that made this possible, and to Alka Bagri and the Foundation, and thanks to all of you who have come to the Deccan. Some of you have come to all of the lectures, some of you have come to several of the lectures, and I feel like I've sort of cheated on the title, because it has Treasures of the Deccan, and though I've shown you, I hope you'll agree, some masterpieces of Deccan architecture and some absolutely gorgeous architectural decorative motifs, maybe they don't really qualify as treasures, and I feel like we really ought to have something to make this evening worthwhile, and I think this is what we need. Now you have to understand, until Brazil got its diamond mines organized in about the 1730s, I went to Wikipedia and checked this, the only place you could get diamonds, if you like diamonds, and lots of people did, was the Deccan. So it's one of the reasons why, at least, there was lots of struggles by people in India, and then of course Europeans, to get control of those territories where diamonds were discovered. Now we're looking here at a mighty diamond. It is called the Hope Diamond, and I just thought it's a good example. It was obtained in Golconda by a French jeweller called Tavernier between 1650 and about 1665, and he hot-footed right back to Paris and sold it to Louis XIV in 1668, hopefully for a good profit. And through a set of circumstances which I don't even pretend to understand, it ended up in the Smithsonian Natural History Museum in Washington, which apparently can be seen. And it was originally estimated to be a whopping 115 carats, which doesn't mean much to me, but I think it's a big chunk. And it's now, what you see now is, of course, what's been whittled down over many years. So the purity, the colour This is, of course, slightly bluish tinge. This is what made the Deccan so very attractive to outsiders, and before the Europeans got a muscle in the area, there was lots of struggles between Vijayanagara and the courtly sultanates for controls of those territories where diamonds could be. And we know that at Vijayanagara in the bazaar, the Portuguese horse traders saw diamonds for sale. So we're back in this sort of zone. You've seen this map before, and we're going to be concerned about, find the right button here.
Yeah, I didn't switch it on, George. It's a side thing.
Okay, very good. We're getting better. So Ahmednagar, Bidar, Golconda, Bijapur, these are the 4 centres of the arts that we'll be thinking about tonight. I'll be showing you paintings and objects which are connected with these places. And we have a whole lot of other objects which we believe are Deccan-y, but we can't be sure exactly where they came from. I would say there's a general drift in objects. The scholarship over the last 30, 40 years has been adding to the corpus of Deccan-y materials, things which were considered to be maybe provincial Mughal or nobody quite knew what they were. People feel more confident that they are probably produced in the Deccan, even though we may not know exactly when or where. So I think the things I'll be showing you tonight, I think most experts feel they are from the Deccan, but we are lacking historical circumstances to prove it every time. So bear with me, I think you'll enjoy what you're going to see. So we're going to start in Ahmednagar. Now, this, as far as I can understand, this is the earliest dated painting that we can be certain was produced at a Deccan court. This is from 1554, and again through circumstances which I won't pretend to understand, this is now in the Cincinnati Art Museum. And it shows a Sultan, Hussein Nizam Shah I, out hunting. Now it's not madly inventive. We've got these rather sort of wooden figures. Here is our Sultan with his hawk, and the various people, with inscriptions here holding the weapons. Somebody's holding a standard, there's an umbrella. It's a sort of formula of a royal procession. He's out hunting. He doesn't go on his own, of course. It's a sort of standard way of presenting a ruler with a sort of vaguely Persian pictorial form, not too elaborate, not too detailed, not too accomplished, but nonetheless interesting in terms of historical detail of costumes and weapons and that sort of thing. Now, you can say, well, this is the style of painting produced at Ahmednagar in the middle of the 16th century. But what about this painting? This painting shows the same Sultan enthroned, and it comes from a history of this Sultan. It was written, no doubt, under he commissioned it, called the Tarikh-i-Hussein Shahi. It's now in a collection in Pune, in India, and this shows the same Sultan enthroned, and you can see it's a completely different style. You don't have to have an art historical degree from SOAS to see this. And obviously done by painters who are much more in the Indian pictorial tradition, very flat colours. An attempt to reproduce a bit of Islamic arch is not very successful here, but nonetheless, look at these wonderful flat colours which give the figure a sort of brightness and sharpness. Very effective. He's here with his ladies inside his, looks like a sort of bed chamber, doesn't it? He's sitting there, and they are waving sort of cloths or tassels. They're very popular, these sorts of ways of saluting a royal figure. There's even a woman plucking flowers up here. I don't know what she's doing up in that niche, but it doesn't matter. It's flat, it's patterned, it's bright, and it's very different to that. So these are two quite different schools of painters who must have been employed at the same time at the court. We can't explain, can't tell you how this happened. And in the next king, we have two of the most remarkable portraits in Indian art, in my opinion. Something which I don't think has been quite appreciated. This is the next Sultan. He's called Mumtaza Nizam Shah. These paintings, this one and the next one, are dated in the 1570s. And this one is in the State Library at Ranpur, not very far from Delhi. And here it shows the Sultan lying on a sort of Indian bed, if you like, a four-poster Indian bed. But look at the perspective. You see it's laid out on a perspective which is not an Indian pictorial device. Maybe it shows an influence from Goa, we can't be quite sure. But he's looking out of the picture. He's got a sort of stubble. He's a young Sultan. rather chubby, and he's got this sort of fat jaw, and you'll see the same in the next picture. And he's leaning on a bolster, he's taken off his slippers, and he's got his leg in this peculiar royal Deccan-y way of being positioned. If you're a royal figure, this is what he's doing. It looks uncomfortable to us, but it signifies, I think, to the viewer, somebody who is a royal figure. So this is one version of the king, and this is another one. This is the same sultan, and here he's seated in what seems to be a European-type chair, again rendered in a sort of perspective. You can see with these 60-degree angles, and the design of the chair has all these little hexagons in it, and I suspect this is meant to represent a chair with inlays, maybe ivory, maybe bone, we can't be sure. And he's seated quite differently here. He's got a bolster at the back. He's giving instruction to a gentleman here, who obviously is receiving it. You see with his hands held together in respect. A small, diminutive person, maybe a son, is handing him what probably is beetle, areca nut, and then again the tassels are flying here. But what is curious about it, no architectural setting. We don't know where this is taking place. It's a sort of gold nowhere land. And you see like that one and this one. Very remarkable, these pair of paintings, and it would be wonderful to see them together. This one is in the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. So it will take some organisation to get them together, but if the great Deccan Courtly Arts Exhibition, which is being planned for the Metropolitan Museum in spring of 2015, takes place in the way I think everybody hopes, we may see these paintings together. So keep that in mind for the future. Now I'm still in Ahmednagar. This is a portrait of Malik Ambar. He was obviously a Habshi, an African slave. He was an ugly brute, as you can see there. And he was extremely successful because he rose to power within the court at Ahmednagar and eventually sort of took over the control of the kingdom under some lesser, minor sultans. And he was quite successful at keeping the Mughals out of the Ahmednagar kingdom, at least until the turn of the 17th century. And there is a very famous allegorical painting that some of you may know of Jahangir, the Mughal emperor, shooting an arrow at a head, an impaled head of Malik Ambar, a sort of wish fulfillment. He wanted to get rid of Malik Ambar, which he wasn't able to do, but he had a painting made of it instead. Anyhow, it's a charming painting. It's in the National Museum, New Delhi, and again it's devoid of sort of any background with these rather flattish colours. And I think from the angle of the ugly nose, it probably is intended to be a likeness. Now this is a new painting for me. I didn't know about this. It was just recently published. It's in the Jagdish Mittal collection, Hyderabad. It's dated towards the end of the 16th century, and it shows two courtly youths. They've got nice turbans, and they are egging on the cocks for a cockfight. It's charming, and I don't know other representations of cockfights in Indian painting, some of you may, but it's a very unusual scene, I would say, and very delightful, and it has this sort of standard Persian origin, you know, sort of grotto mountain stuff at the back, with little bits of architecture. And we're going to see lots of these little whitewashed buildings at the back. It's very typically Deccan. And it's a different sort of Ahmednagar painting. This is from the San Diego Museum of Art. Also, towards the end of the 16th century, an enraged elephant, or an elephant being persuaded to leap across a river, you see here, running through here, and somebody's fleeing in alarm. A delightful painting with these flat colours, especially this yellow background, which sets off the grey skin of the elephant. So that gives you an idea of the world of Ahmednagar. It was, I think, the first fully developed school of Deccan painting. And from there we proceed to Bijapur. Now this is an extremely famous frontispiece from an astronomical manuscript. It's entitled the Najum al-Ulum, the Stars of the Sciences. And it's very interesting for us because it has a date, 1570, and it was originally in the library of the Sultan Ibrahim II of Bijapur, but we can't be sure where exactly it was painted. Most likely in Bijapur, but we don't know where it was painted. And it's now in the Chester Beatty Library. And it's full of all sorts of interesting and unusual depictions of the stars and of magical spells. And this enigmatic and curious sort of image seems to show a ruler seated here in a sort of throne, And there's some ladies in a sort of palm grove here, banana grove here, and then various people from the kingdom, tribal people, courtly people, and here's some men having a discussion. We have elephants, and then we have all these yalis, these typical South Indian Deccan lion-like beasts on this throne. Now, I don't think there's any intention that this should have shown an actual throne. It's a symbolic representation of kingship. And it's possible this does depict Ali I, who would have been the Sultan in 1570 of Bijapur when this manuscript was created. Now, slightly later, from 1591, we have a set of paintings in a manuscript in the British Library. And this is a sort of romance, an allegorical romance, and it's called The Laws of Love. It's called the Pemnen. And it's full of very charming paintings. I've got 2 or 3 to show you. It's all about 2 lovers who are confusingly called Shahji and Marji. Shahji is the man, Marji is the girl. And it's a standard, all sorts of difficulties for them to get together. And here in this scene, they are eventually seated together. And you can't see very well, but out of his mouth is this sort of golden spray, this sort of feathery gold tips. And this, I think, is meant to indicate the ardour of his declaration of love for his beloved over here. Now, the architectural setting is fairly conventional. It's obviously a courtyard within the palace. We've got these rather dark, leafy trees. We're going to see a lot of these trees here. And this type of funny sky. And these are to be interpreted as chinoiserie, sort of Chinese-y type clouds, which come, of course, into India through Persian painting traditions, as many of you must know. Anyhow, it's not of huge artistic value, but it's very lively, and there's a huge amount of invention. Now look at this scene. It's another page from the same manuscript. Here, this is a scene in the garden, and these are all the female attendants on Marji who are sitting here, playing at holy. And you can see they've got sprays. You see they're spraying coloured waters, and she is sitting here, not actually very much involved in the action, but she's surrounded by flames. Can you see these sort of fairy things here? To such an extent that an attendant has to pour water on her to... obviously it's the flames of her passion, I guess, it's a sort of allegorical. She's not on fire, literally, she's on fire emotionally. So, I mean, these are very important things. And we have again this sort of, fantasy landscape with impossible little buildings, all in perspective. Notice they're not in an Indian way of representing, they're like crude imitations of European little bungalows and things, but they're charming, meant to indicate the town. And again, this sort of tree. And a third one, this is where our hero, Shahji, is seated here, waiting to get a glimpse of Marji, who's being prepared for him. You see the maidens. And there are lots of women all around. He's obviously in the sort of inner zone of the palace. But look at this curtain, which is placed between him and her, and it's depicted in a way that's very European, with all the folds and the shadows, and slightly in perspective. So the anticipation is obviously the big thing of this scene. And I don't know if you can see, but at this point there's a miniature little portrait set into his heart, into his chest. So he fell in love with her through a portrait, and he kept this portrait in his heart. So that's a sort of wonderful aspect of this romance. Now, from these, I would say, 1590 scenes, we move to a set of portraits of Adil Shah II. This is Ibrahim Adil Shah, is the gentleman for whom the great Ibrahim Rauza monument was built, that we showed you last week with the wonderful engraved designs on the stone walls. And we have a set of portraits of this king which are really very remarkable and very different to each other. This is a very famous painting. Mark Zabrowski used this on the jacket of his classic book, his classic study of Deccan painting. It's in the St. Petersburg Academy of Sciences. It's tiny, it's not in great shape, but it is gorgeous. And people date it to around about 1600. It has a signature of an artist called Farrukh Beg, and we know that this artist then went to work for the Mughals slightly later and worked in a completely different style. What's interesting for me, I don't know if you'll all agree, is that the depiction of the figure and the horse and the hawk, they're not quite convincing. There's something about the horse doesn't really parade properly on the ground, nor does the king sit on the horse properly, and the hawk is outside. There's something not quite right about it, but when you look at the landscape and the colour scheme, and this evocation of an environment, it is totally seductive. This dark, gloomy, looks sort of wet landscape with these delicately engraved grasses and flowers and things, and then we have these rocky, grotto-y type sort of background. This dark, gloomy, wet landscape is very fascinating given the fact how dry and arid Bijapur really is. So it doesn't represent the type of environment that you would find in Bijapur today, or even in those days. But anyhow, so here is the king out hawking. Here is the same sultan, Ibrahim II, playing the tambour, musical instrument. Now we don't have any more of this gloomy landscape. We have these sort of rather, pale green and pink combinations, very flat. And what I haven't noticed until very recently, but Navina Haider at the Metropolitan Museum pointed out, he's playing this musical instrument with his left hand, not with his right hand. This is not the correct way to play an Indian or a Western instrument of this type. And it seems that Ibrahim II may indeed have been left-handed. So that's an interesting point. And look at this sort of splashy tree which frames the head of the young sultan. You can see he looks quite youthful, and people obviously are applauding. What else can they do? His sultan is playing. They can only appreciate. They can't be critical. They are there, and they somehow protrude beyond the frame in quite an attractive way. Look at the way they fold the head. So it's a lovely thing, and this is, interesting enough, and again for reasons which I can't tell you, this is in a museum in Prague, the name of which I can't pronounce, but this has found its way in Prague, and it's a famous painting. This is another one in the Bikaner Palace collection. So just imagine, one is in St. Petersburg, one is in Prague, this one is in Bikaner, probably because some of the Rajputs of the Bikaner state worked or found employment under the Mughals when they invaded the Deccan, and they made collections of Deccani arts, weapons, textiles, and so forth. So it's not that surprising. Anyhow, here we have the Sultan, again, Ibrahim, also early, maybe 1600s. He's in a procession. He's wearing the most gorgeous costume, and the artist has taken quite a bit of trouble to depict a wonderful floral pattern. In fact, the greatest area of the painting is given over to the costume worn by the Sultan. And he's holding a sort of staff. He seems to be making his way out of the painting. But look at the way these people are arranged behind him. I can hardly think of another painting where the attendants on a sultan seem to be in a sort of procession, disappearing into a line behind, and each face is individually painted. You feel it's almost like portraits. Each one is quite separate. They are not really sort of types. And so I think it makes it very fascinating. They're crowded together in a bunch following their sultan. And then, this is a very famous painting. This is in the British Museum. This shows the Sultan, the same one, Ibrahim. He's obviously a bit older now, and the date is sometimes given as 1615. He's more mature, he's older, and he's obviously standing in a draft, because all of his costumes seem to be sort of blown out to one side. He's outdoors, and he's holding some interesting items as sort of clappers, castanets sort of thing here in this hand, and a green handkerchief in the other hand. And these are standard things which Sufis or dervishes are often depicted holding. So here he is, he's given up his career hunting, playing music, going in solemn procession, maybe not so solemn, grand. He's now become religious, and he liked to have himself depicted as a sort of, a devotional spirit. And I think this is very, very interesting, and one of the aspects of his devotional practices are somewhat unorthodox. Now this is a painting which is inscribed with him. He owned this painting. It's dated in the early 1600s. Robert Skelton is possibly the only person who has ever seen it, but it's in the Jaipur Royal Collection, and it's known through a reproduction. None of us have ever seen the painting, and if you go to Jaipur, you certainly don't get to see it. And it shows somebody sitting here on a gilded throne, and she is the goddess Saraswati, a Hindu goddess holding a musical instrument. And she is being attended on, and there are some winged angels, and look at these vases. These seem to be vases with blue designs, and it's possible they are depictions of great Chinese blue and white vases that were collected at the Bijapur court in the early 17th century. And fragments of blue and white have been found in Bijapur. Now, Ibrahim II was very interested in Hinduism, and he followed certain of the gods and goddesses, and he had certain practices. And after he died, on his mausoleum, they took a lot of trouble to find those passages in the Quran which said that he wasn't an infidel, that he was an orthodox. They had a lot of trouble to say this, because obviously there was some idea that maybe he wasn't so orthodox. Anyhow, it's a very fascinating painting, and one of the curious things is this little thing up here. I don't know if you can see, but there's a squarish panel with an elephant. And here is the elephant. So it's a representation of a painting within a painting. And this painting here seems to be the same or very close to this painting. And this represents Ibrahim's favorite elephant. And this favorite elephant had a name. It was called Atash Khan. And here it's not being ridden by the Sultan. It just has a Mahud here. And so it's the elephant which is the chief object of the painting, not the person on the elephant. And you can see it's gorgeously attired. Look at all this stuff on the elephant, absolutely amazing. Gilded, embroidered textiles, and almost looks like jewellery. And look at this character here. He looks like he's just stepped out of a Flemish miniature, reaping some wheat. And possibly he is being copied from a European etching or engraving that may have reached the court of Bijapur. These things went on, of course. And these flowers, they're meant to be sort of naturalistic, but they populate this rather lovely landscape. So it's a very fascinating aspect to have a painting of a goddess with a sort of signature of the Sultan, not in iconic form, but in terms of his favourite elephant. And now we come to a set of paintings which have intrigued all of us, and it's quite difficult to know how to understand them. This is a painting in the Chester Beatty Library. It depicts a yogini, that is a female ascetic, and she has her hair done up in a top knot, and she's got sort of like an ashes sort of complexion, but she's not dressed really like a yogini. She's got very elaborate costumes and jewellery, and so people have suggested that these yoginis which appear in the Bijapur paintings are actually noble women, courtly women, disguised as yoginis as a device in order to escape the confines of the zanana and the purdah, to go off in search of enlightenment / their lover. So it's a sort of it can be interpreted as a sort of romantic thing or as a more spiritual thing or a combination of the two. I mean, I think we can accept all these broad ways of looking at it because she's very fascinating. She's the subject of the painting. She's surrounded by these outrageous flowers, as you can see. And again, it's one of these fantastical rocky landscapes with another little sort of group of perspectival white houses, which is a signature of the Bijapur pictorial style. And this has become a very famous painting. And in 1985, when we had a great exhibition of Indian art at the Metropolitan Museum, Stuart Carrywell selected this for the jacket. So it's become a very painting. Now there are other ones. Now look at this painting. This is in the Islamic Museum Berlin, and it shows one of our friends here, one of our lady yogis, one of our ascetics, female ascetics, saluting a Hindu sort of holy man. He's seated on a tiger. He's got his rosary there, he's got a beard, all the things you'd expect. He looks vaguely Christian, doesn't he? But anyhow, the lions have obviously been tamed by his spiritual powers. And he's in a wonderful landscape with these splashy, do you see, sort of muddy, leafy tree. We're going to see this tree several times. Again, in this dark foreground, rather like the Ibrahim out hawking painting we just saw. And again, the usual collection of odd whitewashed buildings in the background. It's a lovely painting, an intriguing painting. We have no idea about a particular occasion, but we will see another visit to a holy man in a painting or two. Here's another painting from what seems to be the same set and maybe the same painter, sometimes it's thought. This one is called The Kiss, not surprisingly, and it is in the Topkapi Saray in Istanbul. And it shows, of course, a noble young man embracing his lover, and she's got this gorgeous red sari on, she's got her face raised, and they've obviously been having a very nice time because there are lots of alcoholic beverages available there in the garden. And again, look at this fantastic tree. It even almost takes over from the figures themselves. And this dark, splashy, sort of wettish chunar or plane tree. I mean, it doesn't represent an actual tree, but it's got a sort of mood to it, which is very Bijapuri. And here's another one with the same trees as these. And here we've got a noble young man, a courtly man, who's obviously had too much to eat and drink, and he's just fallen asleep. And they're trying to wake him. You see, here his attendants are grabbing, clutching at his cloak, and this one's waving a cloth in front of his. It doesn't seem to be very successful, this attempt, but it's a delightful, a delightful painting, and an original one to have this. And look at this fantastic landscape up here, almost impossible to read spatially, and then the tree with, again, the dark splashy leaves. Very much the Bijapur style of the turn of the 17th century. And here we have one of these famous scenes. It's a painting in the Bodleian Library in Oxford. People give it a date of about 1620, and it shows two individuals with different coloured skins. What does this mean? I'm not quite sure. Maybe he's got ashes on him. And they're visiting here an almost naked sort of dervish, this holy man who's sort of crouching here. And here is a grave. You see, this is the end of a sort of a grave. It's obviously a sort of a saintly person has been buried here. We have a dervish seated here. There's a flag. There are alams, these Shiite sort of standards. For some reason, there's a very large sort of parrot and again a tree. And this thing of a platform with a tree and a grave is found all over the Deccan. And not only in the Deccan, it's a typical Indian thing to do with tree shrines and the way people like to be buried in trees. And all of you have been in Indian towns, I'm sure, in Indian cities, and suddenly the road divides for no reason at all, and then you discover there's a tree and a grave or a little Hindu shrine. The trees and sacred places in India are a constant feature and are respected, much to the alarm and discomfort of modern town planners who have to build the roads around them. So, we have a set of these ones which have these marbling features. This technique of marbling was very popular, obviously, at the Bijapur courtly atelier. This shows an ascetic character on an equally ascetic horse. Pretty terrible looking man, isn't it? This is the Metropolitan Museum of Art New York piece. It's very delightful. Whether it's meant to be humorous or sad, I can't really tell you. It's sort of, it's witty in a funny way. I can't quite put my finger on it. It's not sad, really. And here, look at this one. This is a composite elephant, and there are all sorts of nasty-looking characters in here and animals making up this elephant, and it's being ridden by these two horned creatures, you see here, and being led by another character, of course. So it's a fantastical sort of exercise, again on a marbled background. And to finish off our Bijapur painting, this is a sort of more conventional array of the sultans of the Adil Shahi dynasty, arrayed in a sort of, with the most recent one, whose name I can't now recall, but they're all seated here. This is a sort of dynastic portrait. And it's perhaps a little conventional, pictorially, except for the wonderful colours. There's this outrageous sort of pale purple landscape set against these turquoise colours, giving it a sort of a harmonic specialty which I think is very Deccan-y. Now from Bijapur we hop over to Golconda, which at about the same time was also fostering its own school of paintings. And you may recall that I had suggested that the architecture in these different centres is very individual at the same time, which is quite surprising because the distances are not great. And Golconda has its own style, and art historians feel confident that they can ascribe certain paintings to this court. This is a page from the animal fables known as the Anvar-i Suhaili, about 1580. It's in the Victoria Albert Museum, and that's one of the pages showing the animals cavorting in a sort of bluish landscape, and it's a charming painting, and the artists have taken trouble to lovingly depict the various animals in quite energetic postures. They don't seem to be fighting, they seem to be sort of, managing to get along, though this deer looks a little, I would say, hesitant with the lion growling at it. But anyhow, it's a sort of opening page from that set of fables. And this is a very famous painting from the Islamic Museum in Berlin. Now, I'm not quite sure if I can really explain it properly, but it shows a tree a talking tree on a mythical island, and the island is known as Wak Wak. And this appears apparently in a story, or several stories, about Alexander, or Iskander, I guess, in the Persian literary tradition, how he consulted this tree for a sort of fortune, and it foretold his impending doom. And so it's a very depressing tree, because it's got, you see, its trunk is made up of entwined serpents. And in the leaves of this tree are these naked figures looking sort of not very comfortable, nor should they be. Look at all these heads, these decapitated heads of animals. So it's a spooky composition and very unusual, and it just exists as a single page. I don't think it belongs to anything else, or if it did, we don't have that anymore. But it's something quite special from Golconda. This is more cheerful. Here we have another one of these princes out hawking. I don't believe he's been identified. A date has been suggested, about 1620. It's in a private collection. And this is a more convincing portrayal of a young, hunter, a courtly hunter, gorgeously dressed on a very wonderful horse, who's about to cross a river. Attendant is there. And again, this landscape, not quite as beautifully executed as the one in Bijapur. It's a little more conventional, but more attention to the figure and the costumes that they are wearing. So, an example of Golconda painting, and this again is more conventional. It's a portrait, a standard portrait of Muhammad Qutb Shah, Sultan Muhammad Qutb Shah, about 1620. It's a private collection. There's no background, just this black, rather somber sort of background, in which the figure is impressively set, I would say. It's in a private collection, and a tremendous amount of attention has been paid on the embroidery. You see here on this costume that he wears. So the face is probably intended as a portrait, and he seems to be, he's holding a flower, a rose, but actually his gaze is going out there. He's not looking at the rose, he's thinking about it. Anyhow, and this is an entertainment at the court of the next Sultan, Abdullah Qutb Shah, about 1630. It's from a set of paintings and a manuscript, accompanying manuscript in the British Museum, and they are, you see, quite different. They don't have that gloomy quality. The focus is quite different. Here the Sultan is seated, surrounded with his attendants, and he's looking down on a set of his noblemen who seem to be conversing. You see, they're all looking at each other. They're bearded. They're obviously the elders of the court, whereas the young blades are down here, near where the girls are. This is the more sort of lively bit of the composition. So it goes from, very, it's a sort of a transition from stately, royal sort of immobility to courtly fun. So a delightful one, and all these different bands and colours, and we see that in the other paintings from this set. Now, this same Abdullah Qutb Shah also had himself portrayed like this. This is a huge painting on cloth. It's in the museum in Mumbai. It used to be called the Prince of Wales Museum, and it's middle of the 17th century, and it shows the Sultan here mounted on an elephant, in a rather conventional way, completely crowded around with all his attendants. And notice many of the black faces, they must be these Habshis, these Abyssinian slaves who are in his service. Some of them are holding shields, then come the horsemen, and of course the elephants. So it's a great study in a sort of military procession, and I think it's likely that it was intended to depict a particular procession on a particular occasion, but as far as I know, this has not been identified. But it's a wonderful, this is not the whole thing, it's about double the length. And just to show you, the courtly characters also take these forms. This is a charming miniature little piece in the Victorian Albert Museum. It's a papier-mâché box. It's dated to the middle of the 17th century, and it shows two lady musicians here under a tree. One is playing a drum, and here is another musical instrument, and here's the lady obviously dancing. So it's a delightful little object, a clue to the pleasures and delights of the court of Golconda. And just to show you that Habshi eunuchs were part of the court, guarding the Zanana maybe, and attendants on the Sultan. This is a portrait of a eunuch. It's in a private collection. I don't believe this particular person has been identified, but we have the impression it's intended to represent a particular character. Now, just to show you what happens in the Deccan after the Mughals take over. By the 1680s, 1690s, the Deccan becomes a province of the Mughal Empire, and all these individual painterly styles sort of are replaced by the more standard paintings that we know from the Mughal period. Here we have some sort of important character. He's larger and bigger, you know, sort of, probably under Aurangzeb, maybe one of the noblemen, receiving a petition from a couple of characters who obviously want to present something to him. It's in the Victoria and Albert Museum. And the artist has really been more interested in the depiction of the garden, I think, than the figures. Look at this lovely cascade here with the ducks and these fruit-bearing trees. I don't believe we know who this person is, but Robert will correct me if I don't know. And another painting also from the V&A. This is a local Nawab from somewhere in the Deccan on elephant. Well into the 18th century, probably from the period when Hyderabad becomes the capital of the Nizams. And then to finish off this sort of late period, this 18th century Deccan painting, this is some sort of Nawab, some local nobleman. He's not a Nizam, he must have been a prominent character under the Nizams. He is receiving his ministers and servants in what seems to be a formal garden. And you can see the lovely carpet on which he's seated, and here's the building at the back. So I wouldn't say very individual, but it shows you what happened in the Deccan. Another V&A piece. Now from these paintings, we're going to go on to something quite different. We're now in the world of bronze, metal objects. This is a head of a cannon which is known as Lord of the Plain, the Malik-i-Maidan, and it was cast in bronze in Ahmednagar in 1549. We know that. And quite likely somebody from the Ottoman world was involved, from Rum. This often appears in the inscriptions. And then when Bijapur gobbled up the Ahmednagar kingdom towards the end of the 16th century, this cannon was taken, God only knows how, to Bijapur, where it was mounted on a bastion in the city walls where you can see it to this day. And what it shows is an open-mouthed, lion-like creature, a very nasty character with, you see, these huge fangs, chopping up an elephant. And this thing of a yali, or a lion, eating an elephant or suppressing an elephant, we find throughout the decorative arts of gateways. Wherever, you know, strength has to be shown in imagery, there's a typical Deccan, I wouldn't say exclusively Deccan, but a typical Deccan motif. It's found in Hindu forts, Muslim forts, all over central India. To show you something of the bronze art of the period, this is a fountain, cast and engraved in bronze. It's dated to the early 17th century, and it's in the David collection in Copenhagen, and it was probably intended for an inner room of the palace. It's a very beautiful thing. I've not seen it, but see, it's done like a lotus with all the leaves, the petals, very individually engraved, I would say. Weapons too, we have from the dagger. Here's a dagger in worked steel. This is from the Aga Khan Museum of Art in Toronto, and you can see animals become part of the weapons. Here in the hilt, in the blade, inlaid in gold with what looks like an elephant suppressing a sort of lion. So animals are very important in weapons. Now look at this. This is a hilt from a gilded bronze dagger in the David collection in Copenhagen, and it's almost impossible to disentangle all these animals that are all interlocked in the hilt and the handle with some birds down here. So that's sort of the hilt has to be, I would say, imbued with magical protection through these types of animals. Now, there's a famous piece. It is a four-arm guard, something that's worn here, known as a bazuband. Obviously, it was one of a pair. We only know about this single item. It's on display at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, probably early 17th century. It's a gorgeous thing. It's steel with gold inlay, and it is the most refined piece of art with, you can see, these geometrically determined arabesques. So the whole thing is beautifully composed. So the curving surface of this guard is completely covered with these evenly placed tendrils and sort of leafy designs. And we see something quite similar. Later I'll show you. This is now from the Victoria Albert Museum, a famous alam or standard in the shape of a calligraphic falcon, brass. and believed to be from Golconda. And here's where the wooden pole would have been. It would have been, you see, a wooden pole would have been down here, the thing would have been stuck into the wooden pole, you would have held it up like that. So another fascinating object from Deccan. And birds appear in other forms in the Deccan. This is an incense burner in the shape of a peacock. It's brass, 16th century, in a private collection. And this is one of the most beautiful and elegant ewers in brass, Ashmolean Museum, Oxford, with these swirling flutings. And it's believed to be from the Deccan, and look at that little monster head at the top. So a very elegant object. We have all these wonderful vessels and things. And then we come to these pilgrims' begging bowls, or they're called kashkuls, in engraved bronze. It's from the David Collection, Copenhagen, and apparently this inscription here, which is in Arabic letters, is the Shia call to the martyr Ali. This is what I read. So it's something with a Shiite. It was probably too heavy to be held by a pilgrim as he wandered around, but it may be displayed in a mosque or a shrine. Here we have another engraved object in metal. This is bronze. It's a dish with an engraved inscription of the Shia profession of faith, Metropolitan Museum of Art, and a very elegant object it is too. Now there are other dishes in metal where the calligraphy is not so prominent as the designs around it. And here you can see all these animals and birds set in a sort of fantasy foliation, and wherever possible there are these trailing sort of tails, these feathery tails from these fantastical birds that fly through the air. This is believed to be from Golconda. It's in the Jagdish Mittal collection, Hyderabad, and it's a very famous object. Now from these monochrome metallic objects we come to these gleaming Bidri ware. Some of you may be familiar with this. These are objects made from a zinc metallic alloy, which is very dark, and into this alloy is set silver, gold and brass inlays to create these gleaming and shining patterns. They're absolutely glorious. This is a dish you see with radial designs of flowers and a petaled sort of rim. This is from the Musée Guimet in Paris. This one with these infinitely radiating chevrons in silver, laid with brass strips in between. This is in the Salajan Museum. So we get this complete variety of geometric and floral designs. And we have hookah bases, which are executed in Bidri. And this one is from the Musée Guimet, and it shows repetitive flowers. Again, must have been influenced by Mughal design by this time, I would say into the 17th century. And here's another example with different flowers. As far as I can see, there are 3 different flowers which are repeated, also from the Musée Guimet in Paris. Here we have a spherical hookah base. This is from the Victorian Albert Museum. This is more splendid, perhaps, because it has these lovely golden cartouches with flowers set in them. I mean, the different colours of the inlaid metals here is absolutely splendid. It's a beautiful condition. And we have another, look at this one. This is a private collection. Here we have a silvered, repetitive design laid out on a geometric pattern to such an extent that it actually fits the spherical body of the bowl. And then we have this ewer. This is also in the V&A. Here, the engraved design, inlaid design, is again skillfully modulated to fit the tapering body of the vase, ewer, and the spout and the handle. And then to finish off, these are carpet weights, or weights for the floor cloths in the Musée Guimet, and you can see they are designed as partly open lotus flowers, and they are decorated with these very stylized sort of designs. Now, all these materials that I've just shown you, these dishes, these hookah bases, this ewer and a pair of carpet weights, they're known as Bidri because it's believed that they were manufactured in Bidar. But in fact, not one object has come down to us with an inscription confirming that it was actually made in Bidar. But we're confident that they were made in the Deccan, and no doubt workshops that produced such items were in different places, including, presumably, Hyderabad, where the wealth was, of course, in the 18th century. Now, from these floor weights, we can go to floor cloths. This is a rumal, a cotton floor cloth. It's in the Victorian Albert Museum, And the following cloths that I will show you are produced according to this very complicated set of procedures, which I won't pretend to tell you, but it's to do with painting and dyeing and printing. So there are various layers of procedure to produce these highly coloured, brilliantly designed cloths, and they are called kalamkaris, which is a term given to this type of cloth, and they were produced, we believe, on or near the coast of the Bay of Bengal, coast of the Deccan, the Coromandel coast, because such cloths require flowing water to produce them, so they cannot be in arid areas, they have to be in areas where there are rivers. And there are 2 or 3 great rivers that exit in the Bay of Bengal in the Golconda territories. So there's the Godavari and the Krishna, and there are areas where running water would be available. And this is where the cloths that we know about through European lists, these were exported from these coastal ports. Where this one was exactly made, we don't know, but we believe it's a Golconda Kingdom cloth, middle of the 17th century, and it shows, of course, male entertainments. It's a sort of picnic here, with somebody sitting on the cloth, guzzling away at wine. There's some hunting scenes, and there's male musicians here and companions. So it's obviously a very nice thing for men with this lovely fantasy landscape. Here's another one. This is, I'm sorry, also from the V&A. Sorry, it's not such a good reproduction. Here we have a few women and a couple, so it's a little bit more expanded in range and activities out there in the picnic. This sort of fantastic sort of landscape, and red seems very popular in these types of cloths. A hunter is here, various people are running around, musicians. So it's full of all the, I would say, courtly activities and delights of the court. This is a detail of a rumal from the Metropolitan Museum. It's on a darker background, you can see. Here we have these seated figures, at least 3 here. This one is bearded, obviously more senior, and they're all being served alcoholic refreshments, or maybe betel, and meanwhile another character has other things to get on with. So it's a sort of the things that men wish to do, wish to think about, and wish to enjoy. It's a sort of male fantasy sort of object, but they're very, very charming. Not all of these floor cloths are figural. Another one from the V&A. This shows a sort of a floral design. It's not so large, I believe, 18th century. Now from here we go to hangings. These are cotton hangings. They're known as palampors, and the ones I'm going to show you seem to have been created for the European market. Again, on the coastal zone of the Golconda Kingdom, the Coromandel coast, as it's known. There is some confusion about where exactly these things would have been made. We don't seem to have. We know that some of these things were exported from particular ports. We have the Dutch shipping and maybe English shipping lists. But where exactly this was produced, we don't know. And this seems to portray a sort of a European in Indian dress. You see, he's very pale skinned and has a very fancy moustache. He has an Indian lady, and they have a very small figure in between that's tempting to think it's a family group. They seem to be appearing in a sort of balcony. They're just above the child, the mother, and the father. It's possible. And these are other women. Now, whether the women in this European's harem, we have absolutely no idea, but they're charming. And then there are a number of designs here which seem to be based on European models. You see this leaping horse, and here a seated character. Don't seem to be Indian sort of figures at all. And then the whole thing is cut out and set into another sort of textile. So it's a wonderful and intriguing design. It's in the V&A, and it has a brother. This is the one in the Metropolitan Museum in New York. It also goes together. Here the 2 male figures have even more outrageous turbans and more elaborate moustaches, and they have 2 children, maybe, 2 young, pale-skinned characters. So again, it may be 2 men with their children. And here we have Europeans in European dress. You see, seated at a table on a chair with a dog. Dogs don't appear, in courtly scenes. It's a typical European idea with some native women, and then this frame, this fantastical sort of setting, again set onto a cloth, presumably cut out. So that's the... And then another one, which I've never seen, and this is just a bit of it, it's an enormous cloth, and it seems to have something to do with a Dutch mission. We have here a fairly convincing portrayal of a Dutch ship. You feel that the artist who made the drawing on which this textile was created must have seen an actual ship. It looks really pretty good. And here we have two Dutchmen seated in conversation. They are very uncomfortable, it seems. They're on very high chairs. I don't know if they really were that high or the artist wasn't quite sure how to depict them. In a sort of house, you see here, with a couple of ladies upstairs and some Indian visitors approaching them, and a flag up here, and various other things going on. And all the spaces in between these many figures are filled with this sort of, fantasy foliage that we see in paintings and so many other things. That, you just don't want to have an empty space on a textile, obviously. So that is. It used to be in the Musée des Arts Décoratifs, Paris, and I think it's been moved to the Louvre, but I'm not exactly sure. Somebody will tell us here, no doubt. Then we have these sorts of palampours, which are quite well known, and there are a great number of them, with these fantastical trees, really. I mean, they're not intended to portray an actual plant or a tree, and each flower here is sort of different. It's a marvellous exercise in invention, absolutely beautiful, with sort of grapes and other things going around. These designs were intended for export, and I think they must have been satisfying to the European market, which is why so many of them exist here in European collections. This one is in a private collection, this one's in the Netherlands, and you see it's a completely different colour scheme. It's really magnificent on a dark blue sort of background with full-blown colours and flowers alternating between these purpley blue ones and these more reddish ones. And it's a glorious textile, which I have never seen, sadly. And sometimes these designs go into embroidered. They're not sort of printed and dyed, but they're embroidered. This is the Royal Ontario Museum, Toronto. And these palampours, the ones I've shown you, are mostly dated to the 18th century. We don't have, I think, precise historical information about any single one. Now, from these cotton hangings, these cotton floor cloths, we move now to carpets. And there's no doubt that the Deccan was also a place of carpet manufacturing, even if we don't know exactly where these workshops were. And I think, there has been some Mughal influence, and perhaps none of these carpets predate the Mughal occupation of the Deccan, but this is something which the specialists, I'll leave it up to them. But this carpet has a date, 1779, and it's in the Cincinnati Art Museum. It has these regularly disposed, stylized sort of flowers. There's no attempt to depict an actual flower in sort of geometric stems. It's very beautiful, it's very glorious, it's very satisfying, it's got something really splendid about it. Now, this is the detail from an enormous carpet, which stretches almost 16 meters long, so it's a huge thing. It's now in the Museum of Islamic Art in Doha, and it shows these sorts of rather crudely shaped floral origin type medallions, and these things in the middle look faintly like sort of representations of water pools, but I don't think they are, and these sorts of medallions in the middle linked with these geometric, you see. So it's got a sort of angular, spiky sort of design, but very splendid from a coloristic point of view, with this reddish background and these splashes of yellow and little bits of blue. So it is a very splendid piece. I have seen it once displayed at the Metropolitan Museum, and they couldn't lay it out, it was too long, so it had to sort of hang down and then come this way. An incredible carpet. As far as I know, we don't know for whom it was made or under what circumstance. Now, this is an example of a set of carpets from the Deccan that have reached Kyoto, Japan. Now, as you may know, they didn't make carpets in Japan. There was a demand for carpets, and it seems that Dutch merchants, who were the only foreigners allowed to trade with Japan for some time, they cornered the need for carpets, and they brought carpets from the Coromandel coast of the Deccan to Japan. And the ones which were collected in Kyoto have been preserved because they are used in processions, in sort of chariot processions of the different quarters of the town of Kyoto. Some of you will know more about this than I. But on certain times of the year, each municipality in the city of Kyoto has a sort of chariot that it processes through the streets. And one of the things that are shown on these chariots are these carpets, which are much prized and much loved. And this example, though, is in the museum in Kyoto. They are not the most subtle or the most refined carpets, but they've got these very strong designs. Here we have a sort of lattice design. You see, very strong colours, and they look terrific when they're taken outside for those 2 or 3 days a year. So there are quite a number of them, and there's a young Japanese scholar who has made a study of them, and she believes she has uncovered she can identify the type of weave, the sort of structure of the Deccan carpets from the collection in Kyoto. So she has said, I can identify a Deccan carpet because of the way in which it's woven, and apply that technique to other carpets in collections elsewhere to separate those which are Deccan-y from maybe those which are Mogul. So it's a very interesting study she's involved with. This is a detail of a lattice carpet, now in the Kuwait collection, more refined, more supple, you see? It's beautiful, feathery sort of lattice, and these beautiful sprays of flowers. So very Mogul in its, I would say, inspiration, but here in a Deccan-y incarnation. And then my last carpet, this is a private collection, a carpet with scrolling vine and flowers, in the middle of the 17th century, apparently. I don't know how this has been dated. I don't think there was a precise date to it, but it's a magnificent carpet. And maybe this is an example of a carpet made at a Deccan workshop just on the eve of the Mughal invasion of the Deccan. I can't say, but it is obviously inspired by Mughal design. Yet the flowers, when you look at the flowers, aren't they very much like what we've been seeing on the costume, in the cottons, all of this Deccan floral sort of decor that we find repeated again and again is here again presented in these fantastical flowers, which make no attempt to imitate nature. And to finish off, another fantastic design. This is a wooden panel from a piece of furniture, maybe a casket, which has just recently been identified as Deccan-y, maybe 17th century, and it shows these two mermen. You see these characters here with these tails? Clutching at various creepers, beautifully sort of symmetrically designed, with snarling lion-like characters. And for reasons which I again can't understand, this has found its way, or this piece of the casket has found its way into the museum in Saint Louis, and Saint Louis is in La Réunion, which is an island in the Arabian Sea, and they have developed a museum for the arts of the Indian Ocean. Sorry, not Arabian, the Indian Ocean. And this object has come, and I believe there are other bits from the same casket that have turned up in other collections. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you feel that you've looked at enough tonight, and I thank you for your attention, and I hope that the treasures of the Deccan will have persuaded you that this is one of the great worlds of arts in India, and that keep a lookout for the great exhibition that we hope to see in New York in the spring of 2015. Thank you.
We have 5 minutes, maybe a little longer, for questions if there are any, and there are a couple of roving microphones. You cover such a lot of ground, George, I'm sure that people can do that. This gentleman here.
I wonder if you could just talk a bit more about the Deccan Heritage Foundation and what they do, and how we can support them.
Thank you. This is a question about the Deccan Heritage Foundation, which is a very newly established foundation that I'm involved with several other scholars, and we're basically concerned that this is an area of India that has not been appreciated sufficiently in terms of its heritage. Now, I don't think any of you are going to go out of this lecture or any of the other lectures thinking that this is not an area worthy of attention, but it has sort of fallen in the crack between northern India and southern India, and we are anxious to promote awareness of the heritage, at least in terms of publications, and we hope to embark upon some educational projects and eventually take, if we can raise some money, some rehabilitation of parts of the Hampi Bazaar and things that require attention. So this is something which we are all working towards. We have a website, DeccanHeritageFoundation.org, which you may consult, which will tell you all about us, and I believe there's some leaflets also out here. And Marianne Cordiero, who's our chairperson, is here if anybody would like to know more about it. So it's something in which this sort of investigation of the architecture and arts of this area is trying to take a more sort of active role in promoting.
Just a question about the painting. Could you tell us a little bit about what paint was used, and to what extent are the pictures we now see faded, do you think?
Well, you know, it's gouache basically, you know, an opaque watercolour on paper, most of them, sometimes with a bit of metallic, you know, gold leaf or something, and some of them are quite damaged. That famous one of, you know, Ibrahim Hawking, which I have actually seen, is in a very fragile state, and I don't think can be actually loaned anymore. So some of them are in bed, you know, it's a variable set of conditions. And if you go to the Salajang Museum in Hyderabad, and you go to their painting gallery, it's a very sorry story to see all these faded paintings with all the colours badly eroded. So they do need to be looked after. And as you know, India is a very inhospitable habitat for works on paper. So the best examples seem to have come to Europe or the West, where they have been more safely looked after, I would say, as a rule.
George, the Bijapur school, can you see a group of them somewhere?
No, well, I think this is the trouble with all of this material. It's scattered, and you can see from the information I've tried to provide about where you would find these things. Of course, the collections in London, whereas the V&A or the British Museum of British Life do have chunks of this material, but to see all of this material together, it's almost impossible. And this is why an exhibition in New York, bringing together as many of these sorts of things, would be a wonderful opportunity.
But that exhibition would come to London?
I don't know. Not that I'm aware of, but I'm not involved.
Sorry, this is a question about the colours used in the miniatures, which seem quite distinctive and different from what you see in the northern paintings. Where was this influence from? You see the mauves, the pale greens.
Yeah. I think your observation is correct, especially these dark, gloomy tones. I don't know. I don't read it as a Central Asian, Persian thing. It's something that seems to have been developed under patronage in the Deccan, but I can't see that it came from somewhere else. We don't know enough about, let's say, paintings of the Hindu courts. This is something we don't have much information about in the, say, the 16th century. What was being painted in Hampi, for example, Vijayanagara. It's possible there was an aesthetic that was developed in that part of India that migrated into sultanate art. But we're missing, you have to understand, what we're showing you is a sort of fragment of a story. We don't have all the details. So I can't answer that, I'm sorry. I don't know.
Are wooden carvings rare? I mean, we saw just the one at the very end there. I was just wondering whether India was also inhospitable to works on wood.
Definitely. And I don't know if you were here last week, but I did show a unique wooden sort of hall in Bidar, which seems to be 16th century and has all its columns and brackets and ceiling, and everything is there of the wooden decor. It's the only example we really have from the 16th century, because wood is easily pillaged, burnt, reused, and of course termites and what have you. So it is inhospitable.
There you go.
It's like a related question. Nothing survived from Vijayanagara, but has anything survived from the Hoysala dynasty at all? Textiles.
Now, of the Hoysala dynasty, did I understand?
Yeah. Has anything survived from Hoysala times?
We don't have any decorative arts from the Hoysalas. The Hoysalas are the 12th, 13th century kings of central part of Karnataka. They built marvellous temples filled with wonderful, glorious sculptures. We have plenty of that stonework, but I don't believe we have any decorative arts. And for Hampi Vijayanagara, I can't tell you how few artifacts we have. It's really, you go to the local museum, it's just pathetic. Little bits and pieces. You think this was the most, the biggest, the richest, the most, fantastic city in Asia of its time. Where all the artifacts go on? And they haven't been uncovered in the excavations either. It's not because I think there weren't any, it's just they were pillaged, burnt, reused, melted down, all these factors. And it's like textiles. How very few of these, wonderful cottons we find in Indian collections. You find them in Indonesia, you find them in Europe, where they have been better looked after, but the ones in India have disappeared, have been lost.
Well, I think on that note, George, there's a couple of things I wanted to say as it's the last lecture. First, from the feedback forms, which I boringly asked you all to fill in, I get the impression that this audience would agree with me when I say that I don't know what I'm going to do for the next few Wednesday evenings when I adjust to life without George and the Deccan. And it occurred to me that for me it's a bit like, it's maybe not a good comparison, but it's like watching a favourite sort of film on, you know, a television series. Really wait for the next one. And so that made me think, shouldn't I, and maybe some of your support, be trying to get George to do something like this with the BBC so we could get to a much, much larger audience. Anyway, there's a thought to leave with you. I think that that would be helpful. Yes, if any of you can support me on that and have good contacts, come and tell me. The second thing is just to say that I feel that these lectures, you know, you're not going to, it's like attending a course in a way, but the good side is we're not going to test you, the bad side is we're not going to give you a certificate. However, I think in the years to come, when you tell people that you came to these lectures, you were here, you'll feel proud, because I think, I mean, I obviously want to think this, but I think these will go down in history. So thank you to the Bagri Foundation, thank you to the audience, and thank you very, very much to George.
Thank you all.